Melt the resistance and open your heart with Transformation Thursdays.
Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Transformation Thursday. I'm your host, Winnie Wang. I'm a licensed acupuncturist that specializes in releasing trauma from the body. I'm so excited to introduce to you our guest today. Whitney Walker is a licensed marriage and family therapist who specializes in addiction, eating disorders, trauma, and spirituality. She also works as a recovery coach and spiritual guide. Winnie incorporates spiritual concepts into her work, including the return of divine feminine to our world and moving from a place of fear to love, releasing self-destruction and rejection to embrace unconditional self-love and acceptance. Wow, that sounds so good. These ideas form the concept of Women Waken, her business and vision for the future. Winnie created the Women Waken podcast, a holistic guide to wellness and abundant self-love, along with accompanying YouTube channel. Welcome, Whitney.
Thank you so much, Winnie. Good to see you again.
This is such a good time to talk about the divine feminine. Can you tell us a little bit, what is divine feminine and what drew you to this work?
Yeah. So my understanding of the divine feminine as it came to me really started with the idea of balance. So I kind of had what we would call a spiritual awakening back in around 2019. And I was sort of hit with this sort of wave of emphasis around looking at our world and asking, why everything feels so off, right? Why are all the systems not really working for us? Educational, financial, justice systems, environmental systems, school systems, all of these political systems seem very one-sided in terms of their focus. Corporations, big business, right? And that's sort of at a societal level. But then I also was looking at the level of humans, of beings, also imbalanced. Most of our focus is on what we create, what we do, what we have, what we achieve, how we look, how we're seen in the world, rather than who we are, what we're being, what our values are, what our beliefs are, what we can do for others, how we honor and love ourselves, how we honor and love life, and how we honor and love others. And so I started in the beginning, I got more involved in sort of a social way. I would go to a lot of events, discussions, forums around how do we work with our finance system? How do we work with our environmental issues? How do we create a more equalized political system? Just all these things. And then I kind of moved more towards a spiritual perspective because I started realizing, yes, it's wonderful to try and address the systems that be. However, maybe there's something that doesn't exist yet that could really shift the tides of the way things are. And for me, that shift is the divine feminine. Coming back to your question, it's the rebalancing. How I like to describe the divine feminine is if the tree of life is a big, beautiful, giant tree, the divine feminine is the root system. It's that which brings life into the ground, makes sure that it is cared for, that it is strong and nurtured and has everything it needs to grow and flourish, which to me is the divine masculine, is the growth, is what can we be with our beautiful divine presence on earth? What can we create in joy and love? But you can't just do one or the other, right? You need both to have that tree. And so when you don't have strong roots that know the importance of caring for itself, getting the things it needs to flourish, then you can't, have that growth. So that's really to me what the divine feminine is getting back to basics, which is it's wonderful, all the innovation that we have in this world, right? Everything we've been able to achieve, the great, strides we've made in science and technology, medicine, all these things are wonderful, but what is it without honoring of life itself? And to me, that's what we're kind of seeing is a detachment from the earth, from the soul, from life, and a fixation on more growth, more profit, more impressiveness, more money, more achievements. And then the soul is left behind. So when we get into a space where we have those moments and we feel love in our heart, we feel love for another, we feel gratitude for the earth, stillness, compassion, silence. To me, those are all terms that represent the divine feminine. It's that which, it's the creatrix, that's that which brings in life and then holds life and honors it.
Thank you for that. The key word here being balance of both the masculine and the feminine. And, your podcast is called Women Waken. Can you tell us a little bit, what does it take to awaken this divine feminine essence? And maybe, I don't know if you have explored into dark feminine. I know that from my history, because I have inherited some of this dark feminine from my mom and, grandmother, which is when the woman is suppressed, which we've had for thousands of years of patriarchy.
Yeah.
To get anything done, we relied on the power of the dark feminine, right? The power of manipulation or the power of sex, seduction, right? So for me, I felt like I've had to rely on seduction, or I've had to rely on manipulation.
Yeah.
When I didn't know my divine feminine, like when all I had was dark feminine. And I mean, I'm just going to take a moment and give appreciation that we even having this talk today, having you on the podcast to give us a little bit light. How do we awaken this divine feminine? Because I feel like until we come into our divine feminine, we're going to have to play the victim card. We're going to have to play the manipulation card or the seduction game unless we have this awaken. So tell us, how do we awaken this feminine?
Yeah, completely. And, to what you're saying, that's really where we find ourselves. And that's what can make it feel so challenging, is that our world does not honor the things I just spoke of, which is slowing down, honoring, patience, kindness, love above all else. Again, it honors movement, production, growth. So there's that, but then there's also a key thing that you mentioned. The reason that we turn to manipulation, the reason that we allow ourselves to be manipulated or used or oppressed, is because we don't love ourselves. And that might be the main force that is the divine feminine, is that ultimate, infinite, unconditional self-love, right? And when you live without that, when you live without unconditional love, you lose hope in yourself and you say, okay, well, I got to get out there and I got to earn my love. I got to earn my worth. I got to earn the ability to stay alive, because human beings need love to stay alive. That's why we're dying at a much higher rate than we need to, by illness, by suicide, by homicide, by all of these things. It's because we don't know that we are loved or that we are loved. And when we reconnect with the divine feminine, we remember that. We remember that we never had to do all these things that we've been working so hard to do for eons on this planet. Because just as you spoke to, women have been oppressed for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, right? There's a beautiful book that a lovely author sent me a copy of early. It's called Before War. And she did amazing research around, it's not out yet, so I won't, but it'll be on my podcast soon, just so people know. And it talks about how deep this goes, just how far back, and that there have been periods of time where women actually did lead communities and cities and, whole groups of people, but that there was this massive shift with a lot of different factors that led to this urgency of like, no, there's no time for this. We just have to act and fight and use violence to get what we want because we can't be in that patience, in that balanced state. There's too much at stake. But the problem there was that in that moment, that crucial moment in the history of our world, we decided that we chose fear over love. Because love knows that there's never anything that's so urgent to let go of our connection with love, which is just never the word for the universe, for source, for God, right? In that moment, we disconnected ourselves from God and we said, nope, we're not taken care of. We're not safe. We're going to have to fight for the rest of our existence on this planet. And that was the ultimate break from the divine feminine. And we no longer had that loving source that said, you're always cared for, you're always loved, and you can love yourself and you can love others freely. We guarded ourselves from others. We guarded ourselves from ourselves. We couldn't even be our own source of love. So how do we start to recultivate this love into our world? Because it is our birthright and it is our future to return to that. Because that's the truth of who we are, right? And the truth will always return. Always. It can, have a dark moment. It can go into the shadow, but the truth will always rise up because it's the truth. So that's the whisperings that we hear. People like you and I, Winnie, who we got this sense to do this work, right? To speak these words out into the world and say these things, because we believe that life is not meant to be lived the way that we're living it. And that the things that we're seeing, the destruction, the violence, the suffering, the oppression, doesn't need to be anymore. And there's something missing that's keeping us from getting back to that place. So everything starts at an individual level. So when we ask, how do I connect back with this divine feminine? It's knowing that it is within you. There's nothing you have to do. So it's everyone's sacred personal experience to ask themselves, well, what do I consider the divine feminine? Because if we're just really all we're talking about is energies, right? This isn't a difference between a man and a woman. We all have the yin and the yang within us. We all have that desire to be nurtured and loved and that desire to create and explore and experience, right? We all have that. Yet we've, again, detached from that yin energy, which is that love, which is that sacred child of the universe that we all are. So we find that in ourselves, and maybe we don't want to call it the divine feminine. Maybe someone says, it's just my light. Maybe someone says, I see it as God within me. I see it as the universe within me. I see it as life within me. And you connect with the understanding that you are here. And that means that you are a part of that divine feminine or source or universe. And so it takes having that courage to realize that no one else can tell you what it is or how to do it, that you are your own greatest source of wisdom and knowledge. So with that said, it can be hard. Maybe those who don't really know how, because obviously meditation is a great way to go within and explore, but some people have a hard time. But connecting with yourself can be done in many different ways. It can be done through writing and seeing what comes out through your thoughts. It can be done through time with animals or children, because they are much closer to the time that we are in the spirit world, is what I'll say. Not everyone aligns with that idea, but I believe that when we first come into the earth, we're still very connected to knowing that we are a part of the divine feminine. And so when we're with children or animals, we can, because they will love you unconditionally. Not always. I mean, children can get angry and whiny and cry, and animals can be aggressive, but you know what I mean? Like if you go hang out with a bunch of puppies, you'll feel that love. They just want to play with you. They just want to love you. Something that makes you feel connected to love. Let's say that. Maybe it's beautiful music. Maybe it's going to hear classical music. For me, I know that the sound of strings, a violin, makes me cry almost every time. It's like, it gets right to my heart. It's definitely a divine note that comes through. So those are all just little ways that people can start to reconnect with that love within them, because then they can realize that it's actually an infinite source, infinite love in there, which makes it so ironic that we go around our life getting little tiny breadcrumbs of love, right? We beg other people, partners, to love us. We beg a job to accept us and to praise us and tell us we're good enough. We beg our parents to tell us we're good enough. You know, we beg our friends and life and social media to tell us we're good enough. When those are tiny little pebbles, and inside is like the most infinite, abundant, joyous love. So we take small steps, and it starts with us.
This is really funny podcast. You know, I am touched so deeply by your words. And, you know, I'm just going to let myself cry because,
Good.
you know, like the divine feminine is not here to earn anybody's approval. And I get to allow myself the space to really process this emotion.
Yeah, please do.
Which is, you know, I've spent so much of my life begging for what do you call it? Breadcrumbs?
Breadcrumbs, yeah.
And spend so much of my life, you know, I'm going to talk about Me Too, because how can we talk about healing the feminine without talking about Me Too? Which is a lot of us. Why does Me Too even happen? Right? I think that sometimes the man takes advantage of the woman. But then that asks the question is like, well, why did the man want to take advantage of the woman? And a lot of the times society blames the woman for being raped because be like, oh, well, look at her. She's wearing that skirt that's so short. She's just begging for it. And it, you know, me being, I don't want to use the victim. I don't want to use the word survivor either, but just a being who has had the experience of Me Too in this lifetime. I've had a lot of sense of guilt for having this experience, because I always think, oh, is it because I put out too much sexual energy in this world? Is it because I was too flirty? Was it because I was too seductive? Right? But, you know, I believe that we are allowed to have joy. Right? Like a 3-year-old sings and dance and can freely put on lipstick and put on a dress. And of course, there's also children that are taken advantage of also, but like we need more of this awakened feminine, not just in women, actually. Men have divine feminine too.
Yeah.
That as a humanity, we really, it will be a win-win situation if everyone awaken their divine feminine, so that it's safe for us to play, to have pleasure, to wear whatever we want and express ourselves however we want, and to dance and sing as we like. So often, you know, I would post on Instagram, and the message is about healing, but there will be men who watch this Instagram video and all they can think about is, oh, she's so hot, or she's so sexy, or, you know, even have sexual fantasy about me. And I know that this happens because society has this view that a woman is here to please men, you know, that we are, you know, a playground or to be used by men. And I don't know if you can shine a little bit light. What are the divine feminine principles that allows us to have more successful relationship and peace in our lives?
Yeah. Well, first to hit on, there's definitely also the divine masculine, right? Which is sort of what you're alluding to, is that we both are imbalanced in terms of our connection with our divine energies. And, you asked another really important question, which is, why are there men who want to harm and abuse another woman? And a quote that I like says that nobody does anything inappropriate given their model of the world. And so when we look at that question, it's because there are beliefs that have again been in our society, in our species for thousands and thousands of years, that certain members of society have rights over other people. They get to do what they want. They're entitled to certain things, which is not true. It's been a long-standing falsehood that, again, has existed for so many generations and centuries. As long as those beliefs exist, these things will continue to happen. So the core principles of the divine feminine is with the hope that it can begin to shift things, because here are some other core false beliefs: that superiority exists, that any human being could be better than another, right? That, so there's superiority, but there's also, let's see, a few other ideas, but, just the idea that we are not all just as worthy of love and safety and joy, right? So I think maybe that's probably the biggest one, the biggest false belief that exists, is the idea of superiority. So the divine feminine knows that everybody is of the same thing, of the same source, right? And therefore, we all deserve to be safe and treated with love and respect. When we have this imbalance, which says that there is such a thing as superiority, and those who are superior get to do what they want, and those who aren't have to just deal with poor treatment, lack, not even having their needs met. So some of the principles of the divine feminine are, again, honoring life is huge. If you planted a garden and you're like, this is great, I can grow a bunch of crops. So you're like, I'm going to expedite this. I'm going to make 50 gardens, but you couldn't tend to 50 gardens. You can't keep the soil turned. You can't water them all. You can't get them in the right position to get the right lighting, so they don't flourish. The divine feminine is the idea that only create that which you can honor, that can be held sacred. Start with that first. Make sure that everyone is taken care of. But what we've done in this world is we've said, no, we want to just keep growing and growing. Again, that masculine energy of growth. Grow, grow, grow. Don't worry about it. Just, yes, people are going to be put out of their homes in order to build this other factory, and people are going to, suffer from all the chemicals in the water, but whatever, we need to keep going, going, going. That's what can you see how in there's no divine feminine there? If the divine feminine was a tree, they cut it down. You know what I'm saying? And that's what we've done on this planet. Deforestation and all of that. It's the divine feminine. It won't speak for itself. The earth will not speak for itself. It can't fight for itself. A tree can't fight for itself. And so we think as humans that we're superior to nature and to animals, right? Because we have might and we have power and we have the intelligence to innovate and create and do things that can wipe out whole species. The divine feminine is silent, like the soul, right? Our soul will never try to avert control. It's silent. It's just stillness. So we have to be the ones to tap into that and act on divine feminine. Act in principles that we believe are for the highest good of everyone. That's another principle. So you honor life and you act within alignment of the highest good for yourself which means not engaging in things that disrespect yourself, that minimize your worth and value, that subject yourself to poor treatment. And then on a bigger scale, acting in ways that takes care of the whole, right? The highest good, not making decisions like building 10 factories because it's going to produce more product and make more money if it means it's going to negatively impact a large portion of the population. So, and you can see as I'm speaking to this, how it's a big inconvenience because we want to be able to do what we want to do, right? As humans, we've gotten very impatient and really greedy, unfortunately, and also pretty selfish. We don't often think about the highest good. We think about what's good for us, and not in the ways I described, not trying to honor ourselves. Remember, we honor life and then we act in the highest good. Selfishness is when you say it's a lack mindset. Well, I can't give you $5 because I want it. What if I need it? I might need it. I have a lot of money, but I want that $5, right? Which is different from saying, I'm no longer going to spend time with this person because they're always really rude to me. And they always kind of cut me down and I feel bad. So I'm going to respect myself. That's not selfishness. That's self-regard. You regard yourself. That's self-respect. So we become pretty greedy, selfish, and impatient. And I am too. None of us are really, I can speak to this because, I believe that this came to me because I have guides and I have ancestors who were like, listen, girl, this planet's in trouble. We're taught, we started this work. You're here today, Winnie, because your ancestors started this work too. And we, as dismal as things can seem, the beautiful thing about this time is that we can speak and we're not, for the most part, going to be vilified or imprisoned or killed. I was just reading in that book I told you about the statistics of how many women were burnt to death during that whole period of the witch hunts and everything. It's in the millions. Oh. They killed us off. Whole towns had totally depleted their female population because they burned all of them. And it's because they were so afraid of these ideas of natural resources and natural cures for things and homeopathic stuff and things that they deem witchcraft, which was really just that divine feminine. So it's about getting back to who we truly are. And I think the other good news is that we are making this turn where things have gotten challenging enough that we're ready. As a therapist, I specialize in addiction and eating disorders, substance abuse, all of that. And the parallel of addiction to the way the world is amazing. I mean, we basically are a society of addicts. There's actually a great book called When Society Becomes an Addict. And it's because we're all addicted to something, because it goes back to the lack of the divine feminine. We don't know how to be our own source of love, of worth, of value. We think we need it outside. So that becomes whatever we find that we decide is not good for us. Or whatever we find that we think will give us value, we can start to abuse that and become addicted to that.
So I have a question. When you work with your clients that have addiction, clearly they are disconnected from this unconditional self-love. So how do you help people reconnect to this unconditional self-love?
Yeah. So kind of those things I was talking about, right? Like the moments that you take for yourself and you start to look within. You look within for your own truth and your own answers and your own sense of love. And again, you can do that through meditation. You can do that from walks in nature, connecting with things that are more based in love. But it also comes to the hard work, which is having to really look at the things that are good about you, which for some people is not that difficult. I think it's a spectrum. Some people have a really hard time, some people don't, but a lot of us have a hard time focusing on the good. But we need to work on loving ourselves the same way that we love a best friend or a pet or a partner, right? And all of those do take some work, right? Especially a love relationship. There's nothing more complicated than that crazy dance of courtship and dating and trying to have a marriage, a relationship with another human that intimately, right?
Okay, so on this topic of love, tell us a couple of things that you love about our podcast together, and how can everyone listen to this amazing podcast that we have together?
Yeah, well, I just love that you were awesome and open with your emotional expression that came up. That's a beautiful thing of the divine feminine. You let things come up. I'll just say this really quick, but yesterday on my podcast, I was talking with my guest about how the reason why we get stuck emotion and trauma is because we think we have to hide things and not let them come out. The divine feminine lets you express everything as it comes, you as you are, your whole full self. It makes you free. Instead, we live in a prison because we don't have the divine feminine. We think we have to hide who we are and what we really feel to give a certain image, to fit in, to not be weird. So, that is such a problem. So I thought it was so beautiful when you did that, right? And then I've also just loved it because we talked about my favorite things. And we can listen to this. You're going to be on YouTube, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And anybody who wants to find me, you can find me at Women Waken on YouTube, on Instagram, and you can email me at Whitney@womenwaken.com.
That's so great. So before we close, what's one final nugget of wisdom that you want to give everybody about love?
That it is the absolute most important thing and the only true thing. I actually just got a new Oracle deck and I pulled a card for peace. And it says, peace is knowing that love is the only thing that is true. Everything else is just your idea about something, your thought, someone else's thought. Love is everything. So see where you can find love in the joy from your day, in the joy of talking to a friend, in the joy of knowing that you have your health, that you can walk, all the things you can do, right? And trying to find that peace in knowing that love is all there is.
Wow, wow, wow. I love it. So click in the description field and you can see a link to the podcast that we had together, and also for her website and also social media handles. Thank you so much for being on my show today, Whitney. And everybody else, please like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you next Thursday.
Thanks so much for having me, Winnie.
Please like, share, and subscribe. We equip people with the skills to navigate the ups and downs of life. Will you help us solve the mental health crisis? Please donate to Compassionate Transformation at lovect.net. Thank you, thank you, thank you.